Hi, my name is Julie Davila. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. Currently, I teach percussion in the Band of Blue drumline at Middle Tennessee State University. And additionally, I adjudicate for a WGI, and I also play in a chamber percussion ensemble, the Kaisha Trio. And I'm here today to talk about what's influenced my color choices and the sounds over the years with Zildjian cymbals. And I'm excited to share with you a little bit of the history of the evolution of my influences with Zildjian cymbals. I guess I'll start with where I started as a beginning player and what influenced me. In the beginning, as a percussionist, I was strongly influenced by drum set. My grandfather was a saxophone player in a big band in Chicago, and so we had a lot of big band music surrounding our environment growing up, and he used to play sax in his front room for us. You know, as a young player and having that sort of big band influence in my family, I started listening to some really great big band drummers, you know, Louis Bellson, Max Roach, Ed Shaughnessy. They were, you know, a part of my world at 10. And little did I know how grateful I'd be for that later in life. But just, I remember any opportunity, if Louis Bellson was on The Tonight Show, you know, Buddy Rich, looking back at some of those clips, were just really unbelievable. And I actually knew from that moment that, you know, percussion was going to be a part of my life forever because of the way it affected me. Listening to great big band drummers, you know, when you think of that style, you know, what pops out at you immediately is the personality of the ride cymbal, you know, and the sound of the hi-hat, because those are two predominant voices within that style. So in a roundabout way, I was influenced by that at a very early age, but didn't really know that I was being influenced, if that kind of makes any sense. But, you know, listening to Louis Bellson or Buddy Rich kind of drive the bus, if you will, with the ride cymbal was thrilling. As I got a little older, I started listening to, I'm going to date myself here, Maynard Ferguson. And I think the first live performance I saw of Maynard Ferguson, Greg Bissonette was playing drums, and totally blew me away. And his brother Matt was playing bass. And almost the entire band was, when they were introduced, was from the University of North Texas. And that made an impression on me because I saved that in the back of my mind. I said, well, it was North Texas State at the time. And I said, that must be a phenomenal school. And a couple years later, when I was making my collegiate choices, I ended up at the University of North Texas. And great experience. Some great drummers, definitely percussionists, have come through that program over the years. So I went to a Maynard Ferguson concert, saw Bissonette play live. I used to watch one of my friends had a recording of Steve Gadd playing on the Simon and Garfunkel and Central Park concert, and you know, we just wore that tape out, listening to Steve Gadd play. And I think what's interesting was that Steve Gadd sort of brought this new linear element to drum set playing that sort of had a flavor of rudimental percussion. I mean, if you think about 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, that groove definitely sort of had some implications of rudimental drumming. And so as I became interested in marching percussion, I think many of those types of influences on me sort of transferred pretty naturally to how I thought and how I would write rudimentally, and taste and texture and timbres and kind of linear composing in marching percussion. So I really feel like my drum set background, coming into that first before being exposed to marching percussion, was an important sort of timeline for me. And then, you know, I've listened to my parents took me to a concert in Kansas City one year. And it was like a percussion ensemble concert, but Max Roach was the guest artist. And he comes out with a throne and a hi-hat. And I think I was probably 15 at the time. And he performed his, I didn't even know it had a title at the time, but Mr. Hi-Hat. And it was unbelievable, off the charts, you know. And the sort of the rudimental virtuosity that he performed on the hi-hats, again, it's that element that carries over into sort of my influences through time, even up through today, and some of the work I do with the Middle Tennessee State University drumline. As I began to become more interested in marching percussion, I think all those influences played an integral part in sort of who I became as a percussionist and what I like to listen to. So I started then evolving into this marching percussionist. I started going in high school. I attended many drum corps shows. I'm from the Midwest, so I was strongly influenced by Phantom Regiment, Cavaliers, Madison Scouts. Of course, I couldn't march Cavaliers or Madison Scouts because they were an all-male corps, but just the amazing colors and textures that the writers, the Tom Hannums of the world, the Dennis DeLucia, more currently Jim Casella, the colors and textures that they were able to bring to a stadium, to a football field, was inspiring, off the charts, definitely. So as I started to become more interested in marching percussion, I was really trying to listen and expose myself to as many of the great writers and teachers out there at the time. One of my all-time mentors was Fred Sanford, and the work that he did with the Santa Clara Vanguard, and the musical direction that he really inspired the rest of the drum corps at the time. I think Fred was one of the first teachers to really start to broaden the front ensemble in drum corps. And with the evolution of the front ensemble, became this huge now new palette for which cymbals could be used, because up to that point it was a marching cymbal line was your sort of your only color choices. So now with the front ensemble evolving and great writers like Fred Sanford, Tom Hannum, their color choices became endless. I think a lot of times when I think about Zildjian cymbals and what the right color for the right time, I use the analogy of the box of crayons. You know, when you're in middle school or elementary school and you get the 8 box of crayons, you're kind of limited. And then you get the big 64 box of crayons with the pencil sharpener in the back, and your world is now, you know, opened up, and you have all these choices. And that's kind of what I think about with Zildjian cymbals. It's like my color palette is endless, you know, for whatever musical application you need. And I think marching percussion in particular has really kind of latched onto that, outdoors as well as indoors. I spend now a great deal of time indoors with WGI, and that is so exciting. The evolution of where WGI has come in the last 10 or 15 years is really unbelievable. And not only the proficiency and execution of what the kids are doing today, but how the industry has evolved to develop products that just continue to raise the bar in indoor percussion. So it's exciting. WGI, and WGI, the last 5 or 6 years in particular, the cymbal line has come back kind of into an intricate part of the ensemble. A lot of people back in the late 90s, mid 90s were starting to take all their cymbal colors up front to the front ensemble. And then WGI, through just the last 8 years or so, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the cymbal line has now become more of an intricate part. And it's so cool. It's amazing now, even the writing's changed, in the cymbal line. They have just really intricate splits, almost melodic contouring to the phrases. But still, with the cymbal line, you have to have the versatility in the product to give impact, to have that sort of explosive impact when you need it indoors, as well as cool colors that just color a phrase, and also then opportunities for the cymbal line to be virtuosic in its own entity as well, with cymbal features. I think what's great about Zildjian too is that you do have all these choices and different sizes. I think with WGI, the product has to be a product that physically kids can manage as well. So going with a pair of 16s or 17s is a little bit more manageable than say a pair of 18s, 20s, or 22s on the field. So there's so many choices and varieties to use. Teaching at MTSU, I use Lalo and I use the Stadium series on the field, and we have 15 cymbal players typically in the line. And what we look for in that sound color, the MTSU Band of Blue drumline is known as the big, loud, and funky band of the South. We march about 300, and there's approximately 60 at any given time, year in the percussion section. So, we have to work really hard to be heard, to be honest, on the field. And the style is very, big, loud, and funky. So, we have to have a strong cymbal presence. We have to have backbeat. We have to have impact. Up front, we use a drum set, and we use a lot of chinas for that kind of explosive power. We use some splashes. We use some suspended cymbals for crescendos. And so we need that quick sustain, in the suspended cymbal, and nice splashes and chinas to embellish backbeat or to embellish impact. So it's a never-ending process, finding the right color for the right musical setting.